The war was not only fought in mud-filled trenches and burning skies, it was fought in locked rooms where men whispered papers were burned by the hour, and knowledge itself became a weapon capable of ending cities. Long before armies collided, invisible battles were already being won and lost. In the quiet English countryside, behind hedgerows that concealed nothing remarkable, stood Bletchley Park. From the outside, it looked like a forgotten estate. Inside, the fate of nations passed through teletype machines and exhausted minds. Young analysts worked until their hands trembled, deciphering enemy communications that revealed troop movements, submarine ambushes, and the precise hour death would arrive at sea. Among them was Alan Turing, whose machines raced against time itself, breaking secrets thought mathematically impossible to crack. Each decoded message saved thousands. Each one also raised an unbearable question. If intelligence could prevent disaster, why were so many still allowed to die? Because revealing the truth risked exposing the source. Convoys were sometimes sacrificed. Cities were sometimes left undefended. The illusion that the Allies were blind had to be preserved at any cost. History would celebrate the victory of codebreakers. It would not speak of the bodies quietly traded for secrecy, and that silence hid a far darker reality than the public would ever know. How many lives were deliberately lost to protect a secret no one could admit existed? Across the Atlantic, another shadow war was unfolding. The newly formed Office of Strategic Services recruited thieves, linguists, assassins, filmmakers, and academics into a single invisible army. Their mission was sabotage, manipulation, psychological warfare, and assassination when necessary. They forged documents that sent enemy units into ambushes. They spread rumors that caused entire divisions to retreat without a shot fired. They trained resistance fighters knowing many would be captured and executed once their usefulness ended. Meanwhile, in laboratories sealed from the world, the Manhattan Project moved forward in absolute secrecy. Scientists were told only fragments of the truth. Entire towns were erased from maps. Workers never knew what they were building, only that it had to be finished before the enemy reached the same discovery. Intelligence reports confirmed Germany was nowhere near success. Japan lacked the infrastructure to compete. Yet the project accelerated anyway, because the secret was no longer about defense. It was about control of the post-war world. By 1944, intelligence agencies were no longer just gathering information. They were shaping reality itself, and the machinery of secrecy had grown too powerful to slow down. What began as protection was becoming something far more dangerous. The deeper the intelligence victories ran, the more ruthless the calculations became. Decoded enemy messages revealed attacks days in advance. Commanders faced impossible decisions. Intervene and save lives, and the enemy would know their codes were broken. Do nothing, and entire units would vanish beneath torpedoes or artillery. Time after time, they chose silence. Soldiers marched into traps already mapped by secret knowledge. Families were notified of deaths that had, in another reality, been preventable. Intelligence success became inseparable from intentional sacrifice. At the highest levels, leaders like Winston Churchill and Franklin D. Roosevelt carried information that could rewrite battle outcomes overnight. They also understood that revealing it could cost the entire war. Victory required deception so deep that it consumed its own people. By the time Allied forces stormed Europe, the secret war had already determined much of the outcome. Entire enemy strategies had been guided into failure through manipulated intelligence. But the human cost was staggering, not only among the Axis powers, among those never told they were expendable. By the war's final year, secrecy had become its own unstoppable force, and the moral line had long since vanished. The war was being won, but something essential had been permanently lost. When peace finally arrived, the truth did not. Files were sealed for decades. Survivors were sworn to silence. Families never learned why certain rescues never came. The brilliance of intelligence triumphs was celebrated while the darker trade-offs were buried beneath classification stamps. The post-war world inherited these shadow systems intact. Modern intelligence agencies were built directly from these secret structures. Psychological warfare, surveillance networks, disinformation campaigns, and covert operations became permanent tools of global power. The atomic age emerged not simply from scientific breakthrough, but from secrecy perfected in war. The victory at Bletchley Park reshaped cryptography forever, but also normalized sacrificing the few to protect the many. The OSS evolved into institutions that would quietly influence governments, elections, and conflicts across the globe. World War II is remembered as a clash of armies and ideals, but beneath the battlefield heroism was a colder war of hidden decisions, a war where truth was manipulated, where lives were weighed against secrets, where victory demanded silence, and where the greatest weapons were not bombs or bullets. They were what no one was ever allowed to know. By the final years of the war, intelligence was no longer reacting to enemy moves. It was manufacturing them. Entire operations were designed not to win battles directly, but to manipulate what the enemy believed reality to be. False radio traffic flooded the airwaves. Phantom armies were invented on paper and reinforced through controlled leaks. Inflatable tanks and staged camps created the illusion of massive forces where none existed. The goal was not confusion, it was certainty. The enemy had to believe the lie completely. The most disturbing success of this strategy was how easily perception replaced truth. German commanders repositioned divisions based entirely on fabricated intelligence streams. Supply routes were redirected to defend beaches that would never be invaded. Entire months of strategic planning were built upon information the Allies had written themselves. Victory was no longer about strength, it was about storytelling. But every deception required absolute control of information. Journalists were censored, civilians were misled. Even frontline commanders were often unaware that their missions were decoys meant to die loudly in the wrong place. Men charged fortified positions not to win, but to sell the lie that the real invasion was still coming somewhere else. The intelligence architects knew the casualty projections. They signed off anyway. What emerged was a new philosophy of war where human lives became narrative tools. Sacrifice was no longer only the result of battle, it was sometimes the battle itself. This machinery did not shut down when the war ended. The techniques were studied, refined, and institutionalized. The success of large-scale deception proved that entire nations could be guided by carefully curated false realities. Truth had become flexible. Morality had become negotiable. World War II created the blueprint for modern information warfare. From that moment forward, wars would be fought not only with weapons but with perception, fear, and manufactured belief. And the most powerful force on the battlefield would no longer be firepower. It would be control of what people thought was happening. The intelligence victories of the war had saved millions, but they had also quietly taught governments something far more dangerous. That reality itself could be engineered, and once that lesson was learned, it could never be unlearned. Long after the gunfire faded, the systems built in secrecy remained alive beneath the surface of the world. The infrastructure of surveillance expanded instead of dissolving. Code-breaking centers evolved into global listening networks. Psychological operations shifted from wartime enemies to peacetime populations. The hidden war simply changed targets. Many of the wartime intelligence leaders moved directly into post-war power structures. Their methods were no longer emergency measures. They became policy. Covert interventions shaped foreign governments. Disinformation influenced public opinion. Classified operations decided conflicts before soldiers ever deployed. The moral compromises of World War II were quietly reframed as necessary evolution. What had once been justified by survival became normalized by convenience. Citizens were rarely told how much of their reality was being filtered, redirected, or quietly influenced. The secrecy perfected during the war had proven too effective to abandon. And so the hidden war continued. The frightening truth was not that governments could lie, it was how well they had learned to do it. Historians would later uncover fragments of the intelligent sacrifices, the abandoned convoys, the planned losses, the fabricated battles. Each revelation chipped away at the clean narrative of heroic victory. But most records remain sealed. not because they changed the outcome of the war, but because they exposed how victory was truly achieved. World War II ended the age of open warfare. What replaced it was something far more complex. A world where conflict could be conducted invisibly, where nations could be destabilized without invasion, where truth itself could be weaponized. The intelligence secrets of the war did not merely win battles. They rewired how power operates, and the cost of that transformation is still unfolding. Every intercepted message today, every classified operation, every manipulated narrative, traces its lineage back to those locked rooms where secrecy became more powerful than armies. The war taught the world how to fight in shadows, and once humanity learned to wage war without being seen, it never truly returned to the light. The most unsettling legacy of World War II is not what was destroyed. It is what was quietly built beneath history's surface. A permanent hidden battlefield where truth is the first casualty, and peace is often only an illusion.